Good afternoon. Thanks so much for joining us today. I hope you're all well fed, maybe caffeinated a little bit, and ready for the next panel, which is community life here at Harvard Divinity School. I know this is one of the most important aspects of what many students want to know about figuring out whether or not HDS is a good fit for them. And so we are so thrilled that Steph Gauchel is here to help us learn more about it.
Awesome.
So take it away.
Margaret.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Steph Gauchel. I'm the Assistant Dean for Student Affairs here at the Divinity School. I'm part of the Office of Student Life with Katie Caponera. We both really are available to support students throughout their time here. I provide a lot of one-on-one support for students with any academic, personal, medical difficulty. Katie is the go-to person on everything student org related. I'm excited we have a panel of students who are going to get to hear about their experiences directly. I'll just say overall, we tend to have around 40 plus student groups that are available for students once they're here on campus. Because we're also a small school, it's also really easy to start your own student organization if you have interests that you want to pursue, but you don't see a group here. You literally only need 2 people to start a group once you're on campus. And of course, beyond HDS, you also have access to all that Harvard has to offer to student groups, programs, whatnot. So it's a very vibrant campus and community overall. So like I said, we have 4 panelists with us today here. These are just 4 of the many stories of students' experiences here today. I'm going to introduce each person, and then I have 4 questions that I'm going to ask them to respond to give you a sense of their experiences while they've been here. And then we will have time at the end for questions. And I think because we're a little bit smaller with everyone at classes and different things, hopefully we can make this a little bit more conversational, and we can get everyone's questions and everyone involved in the conversation. So I'm just going to go down the list. First, we have Nahito Murara. Nahito is a first-year PhD student in the Committee on the Study of Religion. Born in Japan, Nahito moved to the United States, Honolulu, Hawaii, when he was 8 years old. He attended Pomono College and joined Teach for America in 2011, working as a special education and math teacher in Hawaii for 2 years. Nahito came to Harvard Divinity School in 2014 and graduated from the MDiv program in May 2018. Next, we have Jared Batchelor Hamilton. Jared is a second-year MTS student with a concentration in history of Christianity, though he's toying with becoming an MDiv. He is from Raleigh, North Carolina, and studied English and art history at UNC Charlotte. Jared is involved in a variety of ways on campus. He's the president of Harambe, Students of African Descent, a member of Noon Service Committee, academic chairs on the HDS Student Association, and a graduate assistant in the Office of Admissions. Next, we have Samantha Melton Hill. Sam is currently a third-year MDiv and in the ordination process with the Lutheran Church. Though originally from St. Louis, during her time here at HDS, Sam has served as a vicar at Good Shepherd Lutheran Church and is currently a chaplain intern at MCI Framingham. She currently serves in a variety of roles at HDS and is the spirituality chair on the HDS Student Association and a member of the Noon Service Steering Committee and Queer Rights. She is also currently a junior fellow in the Science, Religion, and Culture program. This past summer, she completed a unit of clinical pastoral education in Anchorage, Alaska, and she currently lives in Somerville with her wife and their adorable dog. And then finally, we have Zachary Davis. Zach is an MTF student studying the theological origins of modernity. He is also the host and executive producer of Ministry of Ideas and a producer of Harvard X. So thank you all for being with us today. So I was hoping, if you wouldn't mind, we can go down the line, whoever feels inspired. If you could just tell us a little bit about your journey getting to HDS.
So I grew up Mormon, and Mormons don't go to divinity schools. We don't even really know what they are, except that that's where people go to become atheists. And so when I moved to Cambridge and started working at this organization called Harvard X, my first assignment was to create an online course for Professor Laura Nasrallah, who was here at the Divinity School. And we worked together on a course on the letters of Paul. And when she told me about what she does at the Divinity School, it just sounded amazing. And I started spending time with her and her graduate students. And then I started working with another professor, Diane Moore, who was even closer to my own interests, and it was just incredible. And I said, wow, like I really want to be spending time over here at the Divinity School. And so I decided to apply. My parents still don't talk to me. No, that's not true. They do. But essentially what I realized is that Divinity School is a place to study religion broadly defined. And there's a lot of ways to study religion. Religion encompasses a lot of things. And one of the most powerful things about the Divinity School here is that our faculty are so diverse. They have so many different specialties and expertises. Like no matter what you're interested in, you'll probably find an amazing mentor. And so for me, that has looked like a lot of philosophy and a lot of history. I've been able to take classes in the yard. And that's how I ended up here.
Thank you.
So like Steph said, I'm Lutheran, and so a big part of me finding my way to HDS was thinking differently about if I wanted to go to a traditional Lutheran seminary or Divinity School. Ultimately decided Divinity School was a better fit for me for a lot of the same reasons Zach had said. I was looking for a place that was thinking about ministry differently, that wasn't just preparing me to do parish ministry, and was wanting me to really find what it was I was good at and what it was I was interested in, and kind of fit that together for ministry. So I'm now naturally preparing for parish ministry, and we'll be doing that next year, but I was really afforded a lot of opportunity here at HDS to sort of explore and figure out that that was really what I wanted to do and not what the Lutherans just wanted me to do. And so I kind of knew that I wanted to do Lutheran ministry, but wasn't sure also if I wanted to do PhD work. And so HDS was a really good place for me to spend some time figuring that out and figuring out what kind of ministry I wanted to do.
So I grew up in a very religious household, and during undergrad, I vowed that I would never take a religious studies course. But then my senior year, I happened to wander in medieval and Reformation Christianity by an HDS alum. It was taught by Joanne Robinson, and it was like life-changing, and I had that like awe moment of, did I major in the wrong thing in undergrad coming up senior year? And so I decided to take a gap year because I was conflicted between, do I do English or do I do religious studies? And in that year, I happened to find out about HDS, and I was in the 2016 Diversity and Explorations program, and that was just, it was even more transformative and just more than just information. It was a place that I really saw myself at. And so yeah, that's how I got here.
Hello, everyone. So like Jared, actually, I grew up in a religious family, but I didn't study it in undergrad. At Pomona College, I majored in international relations and studied economics, and my final semester of my time there, I took a class called The Experience of God, taught by Professor Jerry Irish. And there I was exposed to liberation theology, feminist, womanist, process theology for the first time. And it sort of spoke to a dimension that I guess of just studying in general that I hadn't encountered maybe in other classes as much, about sort of questions about why and purpose and values and all of that. And so anyways, I found that at the end of my time in undergrad, and I taught for a couple of years in Hawaii. I was a part of the Teach for America program, but I had that kind of desire to check out this whole notion of Divinity School, and so that's how I ended up here. And I've been really new to the study of religion, entering HDS, and now I'm starting the PhD program, so I'm kind of in it for the long haul. Yeah.
Thank you all very much. All right, so the next question, what were your expectations of HDS community and have they been realized?
Well, I came and I was really here more to be a scholar. I kind of thought I would just come to classes and then go to the library. But it turns out the community is the best part of this place, and you can read books at home, but what you can't do is commune, converse, connect, and grow. And I mean, when I think about the best moments here, it's been a classmate or a professor who inspires me through their example, through their words, through their love. And so I've slowly become more and more embedded in various communities. And HDS has an incredible community and student life team. In the back is Katie Caponera, who you should all learn her name, say hello, because she supports any kind of community building and student groups that you want to do on campus. And it turns out, like, for example, if you have a speaker that you really like that lives, in New York, you can get funding, easy, to bring them up, have them speak, get wine and cheese, and suddenly you look like a superstar. It's really cool. So there's a lot of opportunities here. All you have to do is ask, and the staff here will be so supportive. And there really are groups for any interest, it's really a special place for a community.
Yeah, I think I also did the DivX program as well. Was I in your?
No, 2015.
2015. And so I think my perception of HDS was greatly shaped by that program, and came in, I think, from my first year looking for community and being really intentional about finding community. And I think one thing that I've realized throughout the years as well is that my classmates tend to be sort of what I was looking for all along. While professors obviously are great along with classes, I think I've learned more from my classmates than I have them. And I think something I've really learned from them is to remember that life exists outside of HDS, and that it's okay to not spend all of your time on campus, that getting involved with the greater Boston area is important as well. And I've learned a ton from my experience outside of this community, but all of that experience was from relationships that started here. And so I think the other sort of expectation I had as HDS, I don't think I even realized until this year. I think being a first generation college student, along with never really going to a private school before, it took me a really long time to realize the kind of resources that are available here. And just like Zach said, the amount of funding and resources that are available to you, whatever you can dream up, you can probably make it happen. And I think coming from sort of my own background, I didn't realize that, and now wish I would have come in with that expectation that I can actually do whatever I want while I'm here. And so yeah, I think those are my two things: that life exists out of HDS, and expect to be able to do everything when you come in.
Just one other quick note is that it can be very intimidating coming to Harvard, and it can be very lonely to be a grad student. And community groups and student groups help with both of those things, because you very quickly realize in student groups everybody's scared, everybody's anxious, everybody's struggling to some degree. And also, like, having those friendships and like the non-Harvard life keeps everything in perspective, and you don't realize like this little bubble is just a bubble.
Expectations. So one of the main reasons I chose HDS over other divinity schools, I have been surrounded by Christians my entire life, growing up in the South, and I wanted to find a community of people who believed differently than me, who saw the world differently than me, who practiced, and some of their values were even different. And so when I had came for the Diversity and Explorations program, I didn't just meet Christians that were from my background. I met people of all faiths and traditions, and people who didn't consider themselves religious but spiritual, and some people who didn't consider themselves even spiritual. They were just here for academic reasons, and that was very life-changing for me as well, to realize that there was a world in this small bubble here of a little over 300 students, just so much pluralism. And so that has definitely been fully realized for me in my classes, outside of my classes, when I'm grabbing coffee or brunch with someone. So yeah, that's definitely been realized for me.
So, I was new to the study of religion, and I chose HDS over other schools for the diversity and sort of the different religious traditions that are represented here. I think just growing up in a non-Christian household, but being introduced to the study of religion through Christian theology mainly, I was curious about, wanted to still continue learning about the sort of the theologies I was exposed to, but also to learn about other traditions, including my own, but also others that I'm not familiar with. And then one of the things I learned quickly here is the idea of not just learning about various religious traditions, but also learning from those traditions, and this idea of the humanities being the disciplined transformation of the knower, which is something I learned from Professor Charles Hallisey, so I recommend taking a class from him. Let's see. So I really didn't know what to expect, I think, in a lot of ways, and so I was exposed to different opportunities and kind of learned the field a little bit more about, who's working on theology, who's doing more religious studies, what are the relationship between those two, and what's ethnography, which is what I'm working on right now. So I think one of the words that you hear a lot around here is discernment. And so definitely went through that process and then decided to pursue study of religion further.
Thank you. All right, so our next question, how have you contributed to and engaged in community at HDS?
So the main way that I've engaged in community building is through this little podcast project that I started called Ministry of Ideas. And it's been great because the most fun thing in life to me is collaborating on some kind of project. And so me and some other students would develop episode ideas. We'd interview professors. We'd write scripts. We'd edit them and publish them. And it was a lot of fun, a whole lot of fun. So we also would do live events. We'd have live conversations, what I mentioned. You can bring people in and kind of have a conversation with them. And then I've also participated in groups like HDS Socialists and others where sometimes you lead, sometimes you follow, sometimes you contribute in a variety of ways. And then I would just say, also, even in non-formal community ways, if you notice somebody obviously eating alone or who's looking stressed, I think there's a spirit of generosity here that represents a lot of the values that we also study.
Yeah, I think one of the ways I've been involved with community other than community student groups and things, I think I've become really connected with more particularly the queer Christian community that's here. And there seems to be a strong queer community here, and especially those of us seeking ordination. And so that's been something that's been really helpful for me in being connected with those people through Tuesday morning Eucharist we have, or noon service, or whatever it might be, community tea even. That I think has been most fruitful for me, and just getting to meet people I might not meet in class or might be in different years, and getting to hear them preach or getting to hear them lead in their own ways has been something that's been really helpful for me. And I think something we don't often do here at HDS is share our own scholarship with each other. And so it's been really fun to learn about what other people are writing and getting to read their writing. And I always find it exciting when somebody actually wants to read this paper I wrote for class, and try to read friends as well. And so I would encourage you to always ask what your fellow students are also studying. Another way I've sort of academically been involved is obviously through the HDS Lutherans, I should say as well, but academically I've been involved in the Science, Religion, and Culture program and in their working groups. They have a variety of working groups you can join even if you're not a fellow, and I have found that to be really helpful in developing my own academic interests, in that I think not having a class setting takes some of that pressure off and allows you to have maybe a little bit more honest and vulnerable conversations with some of your classmates. And so I've definitely found those working groups to be really, really helpful.
So I would say, I mean, I'm involved in a lot of student orgs here. So that's definitely one way that I guess I've contributed or engaged in community. But I would say it's the way I find community here is something that's not always related to class. In fact, most of the times it's when I'm meeting with classmates or friends of classmates, and we're talking about something other than our research. And because sometimes I feel like here at Harvard, we sometimes can become what we're studying. Bless you. We can become what we're studying sometimes. And so it's really nice to sort of just grab coffee with someone and to sit and talk. Or when you're sitting alone at the Rock Cafe and suddenly like a group of people comes in and they're like, oh, can I sit with you? And suddenly you're having this very dynamic conversation that may have nothing to do with any of the readings that were assigned. Yeah, I think that kind of just kind of engagement is something that I wasn't necessarily expecting when you hear Harvard or you're coming to Harvard, and that's something that I've gotten and I contributed to as well.
Can I add to that real fast?
Yeah.
I wanted to add too, a lot of the student groups have their own like socials or meetings. So like the HDS Socialists often host fundraising parties or things. But also I find often that like the HDS Lutherans will host like Theology on Tap or something. But I would say that most of us jump around from community groups and find ourselves having weekly lunches with, like, I find myself with the Presbyterians or UUs quite often. And so there's definitely a lot of, like, jumping around from community groups and sharing of communities. And so I would encourage you to get involved with as many as you can. And I find that social time also to be the most helpful.
So I live across the street at the CSWR, the Center for the Study of World Religions, and I think they have an info session probably later today, so that you could go to that if you're interested. That's an immediate community by sort of living together in the same space. And I'm also keenly aware of all the events on campus with free food. So I'm usually there. So, and I think food is helpful in building community. So I definitely go to those events. Community tea on Tuesdays at 4 p.m. I'm almost always there. It's like part of my schedule. And I also came here, this is already 4 years ago, but I came here with to do the summer language program, so the SLP, to study German. And that was great because it was a time during the summer I got to start studying, but also meet people, make friends. And also I think one other thing that I want to mention is I got to know the staff who are at HDS, and including many people here. And so I think, and now I know these people for over 4 years now, and I think because there's always the staff members, many of them have often a longer time commitment to HDS just by virtue of the master's programs having 2-3 years, or if you stay up for the PhD, you stay longer. But I think building relationships with staff members have been a really helpful. I find that really valuable, and that's been something that I want to just mention here.
Can I add one thing? So I know as prospective graduate students who are, you're in this panel, so you're all also thinking about how am I going to fit into this community? I think one of the questions that I remember when I was sitting in your seats 2 years ago was what am I going to contribute here? And I don't know, I was very, I sat and I was like, I'm going to be intentional about, I'm going to be with these people and blah, blah, blah. And that didn't necessarily always happen. That, I don't know, community just sort of was contributed in this way. And suddenly I found myself sitting with certain students more than often, or, I don't. So I would say, I'm sure you hear the word a lot here during this time, be intentional about what you're, doing here. But sometimes when it comes to community, you don't necessarily always have to be intentional. Yeah.
Great. Oh, yeah, please.
And also, there's also the wider Harvard community. So, for example, my area is in Japanese religion, so I tend to have also friends at the East Asian Language and Civilization department. And so I think for me, I started at HDS and then sort of also branching out at the same time to different areas of Harvard that at first I had no idea what's where, and but you find out gradually over time.
Awesome. Thank you. And then, oh yeah.
What about connection to communities outside of campus? If any.
Awesome. Go ahead.
There is nothing outside of campus.
I don't know how to follow that.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of us go to a church outside of campus. Like I go to my LDS congregation in Kendall Square. I have, I'm a little different because I lived here before, so I had friends pre-existing. But there are groups. There are some really wonderful homeless coalition groups that you can participate in. I did one over the summer, which is just amazing. That's at the Lutheran Church here. So there's a lot of ways to get involved in volunteer opportunities locally in Cambridge, and probably anything you're interested in. Obviously, Boston has those communities you can look for.
Yeah, I think for me, Field Ed was, I think, how I found myself connected to Boston at large. And I also have a partner here, and so that also helped as well. She works downtown. And but I think Field Ed was really helpful in connecting me to people who are interested in the same thing I was, but not doing it at HDS. And also through my faith community, I think I found that particularly wonderful for me. And there tends to be a pretty small and very supportive, connected Lutheran community in Boston, and so that's been really helpful for me. And I think also working off of campus can be really helpful, or at least outside of HDS. I would really encourage you to look for jobs outside of HDS, not because HDS isn't great, but because I think you'll meet different people. Even across Harvard, I work at the Cabot Science Library right now in the media studios, and meeting undergrads, graduate students that are doing things that are much more than I could have ever imagined. I also worked at one of the homeless shelters over the past 2 years, actually, and found that to be just an incredible place to meet people and kind of also do what I was studying here. So I think those are the ways I've sort of found that.
So I know the previous question I said don't be intentional, but this part you're gonna have to be a little intentional about because when I came here I didn't know. I mean, I knew a good number of people because of DivX, but it's not like I had community, so to speak. And so that meant I had to sort of branch out and go to an event at the Divinity School, even though I didn't know anyone there, or sometimes I might have to go sit at a bar alone and hope that someone will oh, how are you? I had to be actually intentional about finding a life outside of HDS and outside of just my HDS colleagues. Yeah.
And I think the question about side campus probably depends on what groups you have affinity to, whether that be like a religious community or, for me, for example, I had some friends that are from Hawaii or from Japan or some kind of a shared experience that makes it easy to bond. But I think it's also like how much you go out and look for those communities. I think it's it's easier to stay in the Harvard-Cambridge bubble, but it's also easy to make it a point to, I think, get out of it too. So.
Awesome, thank you. All right, and our final question is, what have you found challenging and or rewarding about community at HDS?
I would say the most challenging thing is learning that your worldview isn't complete. And I came here as, I'd say, a relatively comfortable but naive, privileged white male, in other words. And I remember there was in my first class, I think I said some things that, they weren't cruel, but they were just kind of dumb, a little bit naive, a little bit insensitive. And I had to change, I had to learn. And there was that sense of, you no longer, you have to really think carefully about other people and other commitments. And that's been, challenging and really rewarding. How could it not be, to learn to be more thoughtful and to learn to be more compassionate and encompassing in who you think of when you speak. So I would say I've learned to see my own situatedness, which is a great Divinity School word. And I think that's maybe the most important thing I'll have learned in this whole graduate program.
Yeah, I don't think I could have said that better. I think for me, the challenging part was sort of keeping myself grounded in what I actually wanted to do when I was done here. I think this place can be really overwhelming. Harvard especially itself can be really overwhelming. And I think it took me a long time to realize what resources I had available. But more so, it took me a long time to realize that I did belong here, and that I also had a place here, and that my voice was also valued here. And I think realizing that everybody else around you is also having imposter syndrome is really hard to do when you're in the midst of it, but really important. And I think that's always, for me, will always be something that's challenging in making sure that you know you're valued here and belong here. This community does care for you. And yet at the same time is the most rewarding in talking with other students and learning I'm not the only one that feels this way. This place is really overwhelming, and I think also rewarding in the sense that those other students or friends also remind you that it's okay to have fun sometimes too. That one thing I was going to say, finding community outside of HDS, it's okay to join a soccer team or go rock climbing or whatever you might do. And finding friends that are sort of interested in just normal activities as well is good. And you can definitely have a normal life, especially if you're married or have a partner. And so for me, my family has kept me grounded while I'm here. And I know for a lot of people that ends up being their friend group as well. So, yeah.
So one of the challenges that I think I have found is that we as students can become so enamored with our work and our essays and our research that we can forget that it's our community and it's our student body that informs that research, and it informs the dialogues that we hope to have in the future. So I feel like that's possibly been one of the challenges is, when I'm scheduling an event for the president, as the president of Harambe, and, I'm like, come on, Black students, show up, and, I know you're busy, but, so I think that can be one of the challenges I have found. One of the rewards is HDS has been extremely instrumental in showing me, and when I say HDS, I mean the student body in particular, has been instrumental in showing me community that's just outside of student orgs. That community happens in the most unexpected ways and in the most unexpected times. So walking to class and someone stops you and talks to you for just a brief minute, or you're rushing and you're late to class and, someone's sitting having coffee and they're like, oh, sit down with me. When you're late to class, you take a 10 minutes and you sit and you talk to them. And in that moment, community, you've engaged in it in some way. And so that's definitely been one of the rewards, is that it happens unexpectedly.
So I grew up in Hawaii, and it's cold here. So anyway, so that's winter, but I survived, so it's okay. And I'm also away from family, so I think loneliness came up a little bit. But I think just the sort of way our time is spent, we often spend time reading a lot by ourselves, and so I think thinking about obviously family, friends help a lot, and I've been kind of thinking about how do you sort of think about it as solitude versus loneliness, or solitude that includes loneliness, but it's not just about being lonely, but also kind of making the best out of that sort of space that you maybe have during graduate school. May not apply to you, but anyway, so that's one thing that I'm thinking about. And The other thing is just getting oriented to Harvard because it's such a big university that I think it takes a while, so that's a challenge. And also studying religion. I think many of us end up studying things that are maybe deeply connected to our identity, and so that can be an interesting experience, to say the least. And often we end up you might end up in places where you are being critical of the sort of maybe the religious community you grew up with, or some other notions that you grew up with, and so entering that critical space, and then how do you emerge out of that in a, I don't know, post-critical or post-whatever frame, and also to not take everything too seriously and to laugh about things. I think that's something that I find, sort of the both challenging and rewarding aspect of the work we do here.
Awesome. Thank you all very much. So we'd love to open it up to questions of folks. Oh, we got lots. Why don't we start over here? Oh, sorry.
Hi. Zach, I know you touched on this, but I'm curious to know how this program or this community has changed you as a person. To all of you, but I know Zach touched on how much you had to, grow when it came to him. Curious to know, personally, how you grew.
Okay. Personally, how I grew. Yikes. So this is getting into the MDiv side of me. I came here for purely academic reasons. I was like, I'm going to be a scholar. I'm going to do a PhD. That's what it is. And I have refound God in a way, and that was something I was not expecting. And I would say that I've grown spiritually, which is I almost didn't want to grow spiritually. I wanted to grow academically, and suddenly I've found a way to find both.
Yeah, I think for me, my own sort of life irony, I guess, is that I very intentionally chose not to go to a Lutheran seminary, and I think being here at HDS has made me very much more Lutheran than I could have imagined. And I think that a lot of that is because we spend so much time investigating our own faith and our own beliefs and investigating what it is you maybe grew up with. And so in an odd way, similarly, it's made my faith grow much stronger. Part of that is probably also due to the work I've done in field ed and doing clinical pastoral education, things like that. That was something I didn't expect. It's something I maybe still resist a little bit. But I've encountered that in a way through people and mentors and supervisors that I didn't expect. And it's definitely changed me, and definitely, I think it's just made me a better human, but it's also made me a better pastor as well.
Anyone else? Okay, perfect.
Amos Jackson III, DivX 2018. This question is for Jared. What does Harambe do, and its focus, and the type of program that you all do?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, Harambe Students for Students of African Descent is just a student org. With Black students, we host events every third Thursday of the month. That means either going out to a bar and grabbing a drink and complaining about all the work we have, or having study breaks together. We are currently trying to host the third annual Black Religion, Spirituality, and Culture Conference. So that is really cool. We're just bringing in some Black and Brown scholars from different institutions, community organizations. So yeah, that's kind of our main focus. Yeah.
For people to whom faith in whatever form is important, what do we find in terms of kind of spiritual support, spiritual formation, whatever you care to call it, depending on what your tradition is?
So,
Go ahead.
so there's I hope you'll add Sam to this. We have, for one thing, the Office of Religious and Spiritual Life, and there are all kinds of events and also recurring events where people have weekly gatherings that are based on a particular spiritual tradition, and you can also start on one of your own if you wish. But I think it's both finding space for that here at HDS, and then also maybe in the greater Boston area as well.
The other thing I was going to add was a lot of faith traditions have their own denominational counselors here, and so you can look online or ask, I don't know, you can pretty much ask anybody, they'll be able to tell you, but you can also stop by the Office of Religious and Spiritual Life, RSL, in the front of Andover by the lobby there, and pop in and ask them. I'm sure you've also seen Carrie Maloney around. She's our chaplain. If you haven't seen her, she has red hair. I don't think you'll miss her. She's a very lovely human, and will definitely be able to point you in the right direction if you have something specific in mind. Or maybe you don't see your faith tradition listed on the denominational counselors list. She would be a great person to talk to about that, and find out like what exact resources are here for you and helpful for you.
And if you are especially if you are in the MDiv program, I think you can intentionally, or I mean, you could do this as MTS too, either way, but you can intentionally choose classes that might speak to your particular, area that you would like to grow in. And also for the MDiv senior paper, you could actually do a work that, you could write, or you could do some kind of a project on. So I think there are ways to intentionally cater the program to your special sort of purposes.
So I was really shocked when I realized just how queer the school was, and because I thought that it would kind of be like the environment I grew up where it would be like impossible to be queer and things like that. So the real question I have is, what queer people of color spaces exist, and do they exist in HDS, or would it be in the larger campus?
That's a great question. This is a very active conversation on campus. With the renovation coming up, this has been something that's been really deeply talked about. Speaking as a white queer woman, I know I can't speak to that nearly as much as others can, so if anyone else wants to add to that, please do. I know that a lot of people on campus are involved with the greater BLGBTQ office down in the college, and so I know that a lot of people find community there specifically for queer people of color, students of color as well. I don't know if anyone else has anything better to add.
Yeah, I'm just supplementing. Yes, in the college there's a larger BLGBTQ office.
They call it BLGTQ.
Yeah,
that's why we're confused.
And it's definitely for like the wider Harvard community. So, I mean, in that, for HDS specifically, to answer your question, no, not for students of color, queer students of color. But I think going into the college and with the wider Harvard University community, that's almost more enriching. Wider, like the larger Harvard community.
And also, I think HDS and Harvard, it's a work in progress, or there's a lot of aspirational sort of things here that I think we are, because I think you also notice like course offerings change every year, and I think now there are more and more, even if it might be very gradually, but more and more spaces. And so I think, for me, I find it helpful to think about this sort of where we are at, but also the aspirational sort of desires of the community. But yeah, so hopefully that helps.
Also just add as a transgender queer staff member, I think coming to HDS, that was intentional for me too, because it had a reputation for having such an LGBTQ presence. I'd say, similar with other communities, like because we're such a diverse community broadly, sometimes that can feel lonely because there's so many different people that then finding your people can be a little challenging. But I think there's a real intentional effort to try to be inclusive and yeah.
Hi. So this question has to do with the fact that I am midlife, mid-career person, and most of you seem young to me by, visually speaking.
Thank you very much.
And so I went to the panel, the previous panel about, that was aimed at people thinking about coming to HDS as a mid-career choice. And I'm just curious for you as younger students, how you perceive people who are older, who are coming in with maybe families, maybe kids your age or not, or close to your age. How does that integrate? How welcoming do you think HDS is to all those other aspects of people's lives?
So I have 2 kids, and I'm a part-time student, so I was on campus less than most. I do think it's harder because people tend to just maybe connect with people their age. At the same time, there are a lot of older classmates which are so engaged in the conversations. And when I wander around Rock Cafe, there's mixed generation conversations happening all the time. I think it's probably going to be more on you to break that ice sometimes. Maybe because people will be intimidated, oh, she's probably so much smarter and wiser, which is probably true. But I think there's very much a sense that in the same way everyone's trying to be inclusive for other identities, age too.
I've gained a lot of mothers since I've been here. People that check on my health, which is nice because they do have kids that are my age or older. And so for me, my relationships with a lot of our older students has been really wonderful. I love having their voice in class. I think it's really important. I think sometimes we can become a bit of an echo chamber, and so I really deeply respect the courage it takes to be a mid-career student. That's incredibly difficult, and especially having children. It's hard being a grad student, but adding those other layers on as well. So I have personally a profound respect for those voices in the classroom, and I wish that there were more of them.
Awesome. We have unfortunately run out of time, but I want to thank our panel very much for their contributions today.